into it in any explicit detail. Again, this video series and all my lecture series is nothing more than a supplement. All of this information is accessible on the internet for free to anybody. What I've done is taken the time to find all of this information, compile all of this information in a logical and sort of sequential order, logically sequential order, so that it can make sense, and then you can take this information and do whatever you want to do with the information yourself, right? So, common terrorism information sharing standards. Let's look at some of these standards, right? So these are the 5 goals of the CTISS, right? And we now recognize why it's important to have a standardization. Standardizing our nomenclature, to be technical, our lexicon. Standardizing the way in which the word, it's like a dictionary, right? Standardizing the way in which the words we're using and the words to which those words refer. Similarly, standardizing the way in which we talk about terrorist activity and groups and people and names and incidents, putting all of that data in a structured way is essential, because if it's just raw data and raw sort of transcription, it's an ocean of information that has absolutely no meaning. The best way to do this, and theorists have been doing this for decades, is to look at grounded theory as a good launching pad. I've already done a very mini multi-part discussion on grounded theory, but the way grounded theory works is the following. And before I begin the goals, I want to explain this so that you have an understanding, right? In grounded theory, 2 people are having a discussion. And I do a much more explicit account of grounded theory. I've done one already. You know, just type in grounded theory in my YouTube search page and it'll pop up, right? So I'm the collector, if you will, really interviewer, and this is the source. And the source is talking blah, 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 right? So the source has data. And the source has a lot of data. And imagine that I'm interviewing multiple sources. Okay, what I do in grounded theory is imagine that this source says X, and that this source says X. A lot of the other stuff that they say aren't the same. What I do as the theorist, and this is exactly how it works conceptually, is that I take X and I extract X from both of the narratives. I label X through a process called coding. And this is exactly how it works. And then X becomes a theme or a code. Right? And if you want to know more about how this works, you can go through my video series on grounded theory. What happens in grounded theory is that we don't use a theory to make sense of the data. We construct, if you will, the theory from the data. We build our theoretical, our thematic claims from redundancies in the data. Hey, Mary told me X, and Bob told me X. Mary told me, in her discussion, she said she talked to some dude named Jason. And when I talked to Bob, he said he talked to some dude named Jason, right? Not me, because I'm a good guy. So she talked to, whatever that means, right? So Mary talked to Jason and Bob talked to Jason. They both said that they talked to Jason, so now we are going to look at Jason, right? So she said that she was depressed after having her first child. She said she was depressed after having her first child. Depression after having children becomes a theme, right? Because it's been, in a sense, validated, right? Now we don't need to talk about Mary and whoever, Mary and Sarah anymore. We can just look at the notion of depression after having a child. And then you start to look at that, and that becomes postpartum depression, blah, 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 blah. So, right, we extrapolate from the data, right? It's a bottom-up approach, right? It's sort of like a bottom-up, it's not sort of a bottom-up approach, it is. Grounded theory is a from the data to the themes approach. This is exactly how this is going to be built. It's in the process now of being refined and being built, but I, as a global contributor, I could be writing articles and publishing this stuff in books and all that other crap. But it's much faster to do it this way. Information gets out a lot quicker, and other people who have more time and more interest and need to, they can do it and take all the credit. It doesn't really matter to me, right? For me, it's about getting the information out there, and this is going to be one of the foundational conceptual aspects for the development of the intelligence architecture, right? It has to be, if we're going to be talking about sharing this information, it's going to be taking the raw source data thematizing and coding that source data, and then making a system in which users can access this. And this is what the whole XML process is and how it functions. I have my own suggestions, but I'll get to that later. Right? So that's conceptually how that's going to unfold. I'm not going to write all these down. Actually, I won't even write any of it down. I'll just read it. Again, download the PDF, follow along if you want. And I don't know how many people actually do that. I hope people. Well, no, actually, I take that back. I know how many people do that because I know how many downloads I get of each of them in my lectures. So hopefully, hopefully you're not just downloading it. I hope you download it and follow along. And then also, it would be great to get input for what I could be doing better in future lectures because, this isn't the final word by any means. First, goal of the Common Terrorism Information Sharing Standards. Establish a self-governing, institutionalized standard adoption process across federal, state, local, and tribal governments with common standards that guide counterterrorism information exchange, related business processes, and investments. Now, the bit on federal, state, local, and tribal. Remember, you might just read federal, state, local, and tribal, but now that image that I drew should pop in your head. Federal, intel community, sort of regional clearinghouse. They say state and local. I would put regional there as well. JTTF and DHCFC, DHSFC, and down at the, okay, I get it. Okay, that's good. Okay, so yeah, we need to create a standard in which all these people can talk to each other, like a formula for scientists. Engage foreign and private sector partners to promote the information sharing environment. Okay, so we want our foreign guys, people just like science, right? Scientists in Japan need to be able to communicate with scientists in the United States. Similarly, Japanese intel needs to be able to communicate with U.S. intel, needs to be able to communicate with British intel, needs to be able to communicate with, other intel, and so on. 3, leverage published voluntary consensus technical standards when appropriate and available, right? I leverage published voluntary consensus technical standards. I'm not sure that I understand what that means. Leverage published. It sounds like leverage published. Sounds like open source stuff. Voluntary consensus technical standards when appropriate and available. I'm not sure that I understand what that means. So I'm not going to present it like I know what that means. I'm not sure I understand what that means. Leverage published voluntary consensus technical standards. I don't know what that means. Number 4. Select and implement performance-driven standards. I mean, that's sort of obvious. Those standards that are most effectively, it's sort of like a digital survival of the fittest, right? It's like Darwin enters the cyber age, right? So those standards which are, that's exactly what that means, right? Those standards, number 4, select and implement performance-driven standards. Those standards which are most expeditious in, most useful, most user-friendly, and also secure in structuring this data and metadata stuff. I'll talk about it in a little bit. Let's use those standards, and those standards that aren't, let's get rid of them. And I'll talk about just a very brief transition in this process, how standards have changed, because the more effective standards become is the more standards will change, and they will change as our technology advances as well. Last, number 5, ensure standards are compliant with public law, executive order, and other policies. I mean, that's just obvious, right? Okay, so the 5 goals of the Common Terrorism Information Sharing Task Force. We understand what the objective of the CTISS, yeah. We understand what the objective of the Counterterrorism Information Sharing standards are, right? The whole point of this is to create an environment in which interagency groups, intel groups, can effectively share information with themselves in order to make effective and immediate, very quick assessments of things that need to be done on the ground, right? If information is stored and hoarded within particular agencies, it's especially when you're talking about terrorism, you got to act quick, I would imagine. You got to act quickly. And this information, I mean, it's crazy to think about it, but the information I'm presenting, though it's accessible, it's useful to the bureaucrats, but I would imagine this information is also useful to terrorists. So the information that I'm presenting, I'm sure there's a whole nother level of information that I and the public don't have access to, because they know that people are going to use this information to give seminars conferences, speeches, and so on and so forth.